Time. So welcome everyone who's joined us today. My name is Aina. I'm contributing editor at Sifted. Welcome to this Sifted Talks in partnership with Zoom. So we're here to talk about some fast-growing companies, specifically a pair of startups that finished pretty high up on our Sifted leaderboard, which is a ranking exercise we did for the first time last year. And it was very popular. Lots of people were interested in this. Lots of people like reading about fast growing companies. And the main criteria, of course, is revenue growth. And we did regional scoreboards throughout the year, and it culminated in a big 250 company ranking that we published in December in partnership with Zoom. And yeah, if you're not familiar with it, go on the website, check it out. There's lots of data to go along with it for our Sifted Pro subscribers as well. So that's just a little bit of background on the attendees we have here today. And we're going to chat to them about this growth and, try and come away with some actionable insights that, help the people in the audience, help them achieve some growth at their companies. So welcome everyone. And I'm going to just quickly introduce our panelists now. So we have Hedda. She's co-founder and CEO of Swedish pet insurtech Lassie. This company was founded in 2020 and it raised a Series B in 2023. Lassie also leans into preventative care, so helping people, helping pet owners avoid sickness as much as possible for their pets. We also have Max. He's co-founder and CEO of a Munich company called Finn, which allows customers to rent cars for a monthly subscription. Founded in 2019, the company this week secured a big old chunk of financing, up to 1 billion, which is kind of a mind-boggling sum of money. But yeah, we're going to chat about that a little bit with Max. And we also have Andy, who is mid-market sales, head of mid-market sales for the EMEA region for Zoom. We're using Zoom right now, of course. It's become a verb since COVID. Very useful, of course, and a big part of our lives. Andy is going to help us. We're going to chat about future growth, and of course, inevitably, we'll chat about AI and all the kind of tools that companies are going to need in the future. So you'll have a good perspective on that for us. So cool. So let's get started. I'm going to maybe go to Max first. Max, if you'd like to kick us off, if you'd like to tell us a little potted history of Finn, what are some of the big things along the way that helped you guys grow so fast?
Yeah, I think when we look back over the past kind of like 6 years, it feels like at the same time a lot of time has gone by and very little. No, but I think ultimately what we have been seeing is that focusing on customers is the key thing to ultimately facilitate growth, right? Something where there is a very strong demand for alternative products in the space that we operate in. It's not a uncompetitive space, but by solving customer problems in a new way, by thinking things first principle and ultimately trying to understand what are people trying to accomplish, what is their goal, what is their job to be done, and how can you fill a gap in that space was extremely key to us. It is still every day extremely key to us, and so I think ultimately focusing on nailing that product market fit and then kind of like building from there is, I think, the key contributor to the growth.
Thank you, Max. I look forward to going a bit deeper into some of these points you made in the session. I'm going to turn to Hedda. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Lassie and what kind of growth path you guys have been on?
Yeah, so a bit similar to what Max said. I think we focus a lot on the customers. For us, we launched our pet insurance with this preventive focus first in Sweden. And Sweden is the most mature market when it comes to pet insurance. Here, between 90% for dog owners, around 60% of cat owners have pet insurance, but it's very different in other markets in Europe. But I think that meant we had a lot of competition in Sweden. We had to really kind of be great, be good, we all took turns being in the customer support, being really close to the customers in the weekends, in the evening, in the beginning, to really nail the customer journey. And it turns out, I think we were really pretty close from the start, but we then adapted from that. What customers really liked with us was we offered what everyone else was, which was great pet insurance, but we also offered something extra on top of it, which they didn't have to pay for, which was kind of a good app where you could do the claims processing, you could chat, you could see an overview of your insurance, but you also had this preventive app where you could do courses and quizzes, earn points, and reduce your price. So our customers felt like for the same price as a competitor, or even better, sometimes they got a lot more value, which then also kind of sparked really good organic growth. People started talking about it. So that obviously became a really good flywheel for us. I think also looking back at our growth journey, I think two key things for us has been pretty early going on country expansion. And for us, we picked the biggest market in Europe, or the second biggest, but the biggest market in European Union as our second market, which is Germany, which is, I think, was a big bet. A lot of people asked us if you were crazy, why didn't you pick a Nordic country as the second one? But I think that was key for our growth because we're a digital product. So it was the same work for us to go to Germany as to another country. So that really unlocked a lot of growth. But then I think also we also very early on took a decision to be very lean on the team structure, to think about how to automate things very early on. And this was before kind of the AI wave and also before the profitability wave, which has played really good in our favor right now, because we are still a very small team, which means that we can very easily kind of turn into profitability or invest most of our money into marketing or upfront customer acquisition costs. So that was some of the early bets that we did that really paid off.
Nice one. Thanks for that, Hedda. That's interesting. So you all had a little bit of experience on the customer supports, and I do see you have good Trustpilot reviews online. I'm also intrigued. You mentioned the Swedes are very good at insuring the dogs and cats. Why is that?
I think in Sweden, we've seen our pets as family members for a really, really long time. And that means that you want to be able to save them from something really expensive like cancer. Before, maybe you put that, okay, the injury is more expensive than what we bought the pet for, then maybe it's time for a new pet. But when you see your pets as a family member, you want to be able to do that surgery or do something bigger. I think also in Sweden, we started quite early with more advanced vet care, which means that vet prices has increased and goes up. That also leads to higher penetration of pet insurance. So I think those two things.
Yeah, yeah. Pet insurance costs have, well, going to the vet has certainly gone bananas expensive around Europe. We'll come back to that for sure. Max, just picking up on this point Hedda made about, trying your hand at different things in the company. You've had different roles within Finn. You were chief growth officer, I think, at one point as well. Do you think that's important to have had experience around the company?
We actually do a similar thing. We now do it a little bit more formalized, but we have done it also in the early days. So I still remember kind of like delivering the first 50 cars myself, like some of them, not all of them, but like a couple of them I delivered myself, or also kind of like selling to the first couple of customers. I think that building up that empathy and building up that muscle to understand kind of like what is really, really bothering people is super, super crucial. And we are still doing it to this date now, a little bit more formalized, as I mentioned, but we still have basically internships that we offer to like basically everybody in management to kind of like go to customer facing departments and really see kind of like how do customers respond, kind of like what are they frustrated about, what is their perspective, and to do this at least twice a year to ultimately not lose that empathy and not lose that direct connection to your most important stakeholder.
Very nice. Thank you, Max. Andy, of course, Zoom is on, in many ways on a different stratosphere of growth to a lot of European companies. And, it's been a massive few years for your company. You know, have you heard anything from Max and Hedda that sounds very similar to the kind of journey you guys have been on?
Yeah, definitely. Firstly, just a really quick shout out. Thank you very much for having me on this today. And as much as Max and Hedda and their stories are going to be the stars of the show, hopefully there's some learnings that I can give, even though Zoom's a US company. Some of the things that we've experienced in the EMEA region will be interesting for the audience. I've been fortunate enough to be an employee of Zoom since early 2017. So I'm sort of casting my mind back to the early days, first boots on the ground in the region and scaling up pretty much from scratch across the European countries. And definitely some similarities and parallels, which the guys were talking about there, which I can relate to. But also now, like Zoom, probably what everybody is familiar with is like the meetings and the webinars, but we've diversified our offering quite significantly over the last 12 to 18 months. And it's almost getting into that startup mentality again and trying to go after newer markets. So a lot of the things that they were touching on there are interesting, definitely relatable. What Hedda was saying around betting big into new markets, that's something that, you know, we're going through right now. And one of the things I'm tasked with delivering at the minute is building an emerging market segment. So quite interesting, just assessing which we define as core markets that, you know, we absolutely have to have fundamentals in place to go and unlock the opportunities there, but also where else within the region can we go and find some additional growth from. So yeah, hopefully some interesting things to talk about throughout the session today.
Thank you very much, Andy. And yeah, actually, I neglected to say at the beginning, if anyone in the audience has questions throughout the session, pop them in the box, the Q&A box, the chat box, and we will be able to put them to the guys here in the room as we go along. I'm going to return to Hedda just to chat a little bit more about, you know, I have a personal interest in, I have a dog as well that I got during COVID, and I've used some of your competitors' products in that time. We lived in the UK, now we're living in France. And, you know, they're very cool, these apps. They're very quick at reimbursing people and nice UX or nice UI as well, which I appreciate because I'm terrible with, you know, handling documents and whatnot. But it has been this explosion of growth in the last few years with pet ownership. You know, what do you see for the future? Do you think it can continue like this, or is it gonna even out a wee bit?
I think the growth for pets was insane during kind of 2020, 21, 22, where there was a lot of people that never had pets that for the first time in their life maybe could have one because they were working from home and they maybe couldn't have the lifestyle before. I think we're definitely coming to more kind of stable levels where we're definitely seeing a step increase, but the acceleration is not as high anymore. So the pet population has definitely increased, and now we're seeing more like normal level growth again. I think most companies that I've talked to, and Lassie as well, do a hybrid working mode nowadays, which means that you can still kind of work from home and have your dog or cat, but you can also go into the office and mix that. And a lot of companies have also kind of put in a lot of focus on making sure the offices are dog friendly, but also allergy free. So I think it's here to stay. I think there's a saying that pets are your new babies and plants are your new pets. So I think definitely there's a lot of kind of younger couples first getting a pet. So I think that trend is definitely here to stay, the humanization of pets trend. But then I think COVID was a little bit special.
Yeah, and pet parents has kind of entered the vocabulary now, which I know makes some people roll their eyes, that term, but I would use it for in our situation. Max, do you have any pets at home? Have you been using any of these insurtech services?
Just a son, just a baby. No pets at home. It's a very emotional topic. I think ultimately that connection that you have to that topic is just super cool to see, right? And it's such an emotional product. It's so important. and seeing that connection to customers is, I think, always really, really rewarding. And so, yeah, great industry to be in, I would say.
No, I think that's definitely very kind of fair call out. I think insurance in general is like maybe not the biggest passion for people, but their pets is. So I think that makes it more fun to do marketing around. It plays kind of, it's easier and it's more fun and it's easier to attract employees also because pets are such a core part of many people's life.
Absolutely.
Indeed. My dog is sitting behind me here.
Mine
Hopefully,
as well.
hopefully he won't bark during this session, but we'll see. Max, I was going to turn to you and just continuing on this kind of theme of COVID changing our lives and, getting everyone familiar with, ordering things or doing your business online. It's clearly been a bit of a tailwind for your company, the monthly car subscription, which I'm not super familiar with it. I know my friends have used it in different. I think there's different services in different cities, but it seems to be going well in Germany. Do you think it's taken hold in certain cities more than others? And have you any way of explaining that?
Yeah, so we see ultimately, I think, two behaviors that are super, super interesting. So I think from a demographic standpoint, we are seeing that basically people in the city center obviously are not the target group, right? Like if you can get around with public transport, if you can cycle to work, right? Like that's not the use case where we excel, but I think really in the suburban areas and in the outskirts of cities, or let's say also in more rural areas, I think where the reality just is you still need a car to get from A to B. I think that's an area where we typically succeed and where we see a very strong demand and adoption from the product. And I think the other side of our business is we are quite keen on ultimately also pushing electric vehicle adoption. Where 2024 has not been the easiest year for the market overall, specifically in Germany, and in the rest of Europe, it's a mixed picture, I would say. But there we very much see kind of like where there's more infrastructure, there's also more demand. So the demand is slightly localized depending on the electric vehicle infrastructure. But I think these are the two main drivers of really the geographic kind of like mapping of demand that we see. Overall, it's still quite in line with kind of like where people live, where people spend time, how also where they have higher income, there's slightly more demand. So I think it's fairly in line with expectations.
And do you think this, this tricky transition to electric cars, has that been helpful for your company in many ways? Because there's a certain phobia, I think, to commit to buying electric cars. So I guess people would be more likely to maybe, use your service and try them out for a while first before buying them.
Yeah, I think there's different levels to it, right? Like, so in principle, basically, the shift to electric vehicles is providing a very interesting inflection point in our journey in how we interact with cars, right? Like for the first time in maybe years, you're wondering kind of like, probably not us, but like a different generation is wondering kind of like, how have I gotten my car for the past couple of times, and now with an electric vehicle, does that need to change? I think it's also an opportunity that is embraced by the OEMs to kind of like rethink how do they want to do sales, how do they want to give access to their vehicles, and so I think on that level, it's definitely a huge benefit. I think the uncertainty that has been introduced by, I think, on the one hand side, governments in terms of how they handle subsidies and so on, but also from the OEMs themselves and the confidence that they have in their own products and price volatility and so on. I think that's obviously not a helper, right? And so not only that did not only hurt kind of like consumer trust, it also hurt us financially. But I think overall, EVs are from our perspective the very clear future. Not everybody in the industry agrees with us here, and I think also many of our competitors don't. But it's one area that we invest in quite heavily, and one area where we believe that there will be significant demand from both consumers and businesses alike.
Just if I ask you practically, Max, how the service works. So you can choose a model of car that you want to use for a time period. Can you chop and change then? Can you use a different model? What are the rules around that?
So you can, during the period, not change, but then afterwards you can change it at any moment in time, right? So you commit, so to say, for a minimum holding period of 6, 12, 18 months. And then afterwards you can change flexibly. And I think the key benefit of the model that we are offering is you are able to ultimately see what we offer online. You're able to basically make a decision, hey, this is the right car, this is the right model for me in less than 5 minutes, can pick the perfect term, the perfect kilometer package, can check out within that 5 minutes easily, and then ultimately get a car delivered to your doorstep where everything is already included. You just need to focus on the charging and the driving, right? So that ease of use, that convenience, I think, is the key advantage of the model, while at the same time, we of course want to be price competitive with alternatives, right? We don't want to say, hey, you need to pay 20, 30% more to use our services. You need to pay for using our services, but it's not something that is materially different than if you would basically stitch everything together yourself.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. I'm going to broaden out the discussion now. I think we could devote a bit of time to talking about AI because everyone does these days, and Sifted has been writing about AI agents this week, and I was at the AI summit in Paris. I saw Sam Altman from a distance, and yeah, lots of gushing talk about AI as you would expect. You've both said that you use automation in your companies. I'm just curious, where do you begin now? Because there's so many AI options out there. How do you figure out what tools you need? How do you not get distracted by the overwhelming breadth of AI tools that are out there? And yeah, what's that process been like? I'm gonna go to Heather. Maybe you want to chat to us about that.
Yeah, for us it was pretty easy actually, because the most important part where you satisfy customers are when you're actually showing them that the product works, which is when you file a claim and get the money back. So for us, we know that's a pain point for customer. That's really when you can delight them. That's when you show that, the promises that we gave you when you signed up still holds. So for us, we saw that that was a perfect opportunity to do AI. There's a lot of smaller claims, easy claims that you can categorize, make sure to match to, are they covered by terms and conditions? So we built our own AI here. There was no AI agents to integrate with, which means that for the claims that are passed by this, we can pay out immediately. You hand in the claim, and then it's only the bank that will maybe defer it to 15 minutes, but in our system, it's done automatically, immediately. And customers love, love, love this. I mean, they're so shocked, especially in Germany, where I think people in Sweden are maybe a bit spoiled with digital experiences, but in Germany, I mean, the Trustpilot, they were like, what? Why? Just got an email back directly. Is there something wrong? You already said that you were paying it out. So I think that's really where you can amaze the customers. And I think that's also how, for us, we choose the important areas. I think the customer's perspective is always most important, but also you can also look internally if there's somewhere you spend a lot of time or money in. But for us, definitely claims was the most important area to get started with. Then I think we're seeing some really kind of important projects looking at kind of marketing, recruitment, finance, customer success that we're working in. But I think you really need to pick them in order of a priority, what's going to give the biggest impact for your customers. I think it's always a problem for a startup to spread yourself too thin. You can't do everything at once, then you're not going to be good at anything. So rather like invest, make something really, really great, instead of doing everything a bit so-so.
Yeah, I haven't used Lassie, but I can vouch for the speed of the claim reimbursement on some competitor companies, and yeah, it's amazing. It's very cool. I'm going to come to Andy in 1 second, but first I'm just going to check back in with Max because I read on LinkedIn. I was just doing some research on Finn, and I read a quote which said something like, "Do something manually once at Finn, or maybe twice, but never 3 times will you do it manually. You'll have to automate it then." So I get the sense that there is a culture of using these powerful tools to help you in your job. Has this been a big help for you as you've been growing?
Yeah, so how we think about this topic is like we've been doing kind of like automation, and you can call it process automation, or you can call it whatever you want, like ultimately with the goal to kind of like alleviate the task from people since the inception of the company. And how we look at the topic is basically there's two ways of automating things: either a deterministic way, where you ultimately always, like, if you put in the same input, you get the same output, or there's a non-deterministic way of automating things. And we've become really, really good in the deterministic automation piece. And for the past half year, we are like really curious and hungry to also get good in the non-deterministic piece, which I think is just the area that is emerging around AI, around using LLMs, around using different tools. And I fully agree with Heather that ultimately you cannot spread yourself too thin, and you need to prioritize and pick your battles very, very wisely. However, where we prioritize, or how we prioritize, is probably a little bit different to what Heather shared. Is we don't take the areas where we can have the biggest impact, but we pick the areas where we can launch the quickest, right? Like where we have maybe a slightly higher tolerance for errors, where we have a little lower kind of like, or a higher appetite for risk also in how that solutions work, because we have built a lot of infrastructure based on that deterministic automation that doesn't work at all for the non-deterministic automation. So everything around error handling, uptime monitoring, quality assurance, like all of that doesn't work for the non-deterministic part. And so that is a lot harder. And so our main challenge is just like, or our main approach is just like build up that muscle, get things out of the door quickly, see how you can maybe provide a smaller impact, but a meaningful impact in a very quick fashion, and build up that muscle to ultimately scale these efforts over time.
And are you using LLMs already?
Yeah, quite a bit. But I mean, like for me, how we use LLMs is like we use them as a part to kind of like generate responses to customers in a deterministic process automation, right? Like we aren't using LLMs to kind of like make any larger business decisions. Some of our kind of like suggestions for follow-up cars are built within LLMs and so on. Like there is some element to it where we leverage the technology, but I think everybody is really in the infancy of kind of like how this will look like in 3, 4, 5 years down the road, simply because the infrastructure for kind of like doing this on scale doesn't really exist yet. Like, right, there's the recommender systems and so on, I think, where this is a little bit better understood. But I think around leveraging this in service or sales on scale, I haven't found a tool yet that is really delivering that quality assurance, that high degree of automation, and that reliability that you're looking for on scale. But it will be there, right? Like, and maybe we haven't found it yet. Maybe we will find it in 3 months. Maybe we will find it in a year. I have no doubt that it will be there. But I think we are still in this kind of like explosion of the ecosystem, where each month like 20 new players emerge, and all of them promise the world to you. And that's super, super exciting. And that's great. And then maybe 1 or 2 of them can deliver on what they're actually selling, and you try them out and you see kind of like how you can leverage them.
Thank you, Max. I see in the meantime, by the way, that we have some questions that have come through. So I'm gonna go to them in a second. Thank you for sending them in. That's great. But I just want to turn to Andy quickly. Andy, what is the market telling you then when you go out and you meet startups, companies? What are some of the big tools that are in demand at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite interesting just listening to both the guys there, because I think effectively they touched on the 2 main areas that we are hearing from our customers, or certainly engaging and consulting with. And they're not mutually exclusive, but they're definitely sort of 2 main themes. And that's how are you as a business, as your startup, investing in AI and adopting it internally to making your people and your processes more efficient? And then how are you also incorporating AI into your offering to deliver more value to your customers? And I think they both sort of like pretty much covered those high level themes and categories head on there. And if you think about the internal piece, right, and how you're making your people more efficient, more productive, AI, you can go down the rabbit hole. You know, I think as soon as we all think we've got an understanding on the basics, it evolves overnight, and all of a sudden you feel behind again, right? So you try and just keep a pretty simplistic approach to it, even, you know, down to just documenting internal process, things that are taking people a long time to do right now. And if there's an application or a tool out there that can do that to the same level of quality or better a lot quicker, then it makes sense for an organization to assess if that is ultimately going to deliver a value. And why I say that's not exactly mutually exclusive to then delivering more value to your customers as a consequence of that investment. If you're freeing up people's time to focus on more important things rather than doing the manual and the mundane, then ultimately, surely they're going to be delivering more value back to your customers. To your second part of that question, I mean, there's a lot, right? If you've been at the conference in this week, there's so many out there. I think every company, every man and their dog, to pardon the pun there a little bit, is professing to have an AI offering, right? I think the simple you can make that to articulate it to your customers without confusing and bamboozling, because they're getting it from all angles, right? All of their providers are coming to them saying, hey, look at our AI offering, listen to our AI story. Cut through the noise, keep it simple. How does it add more value to them today as a customer than what they're currently getting from you? I think that's going to stand you in a much better position.
Yeah, exactly. I think people have tacked on the AI adjective to their products now, and sometimes it's not clear, you know, what the extra benefit of that is. So that's
tell the story. I mean, the guys are sort of alluding to some of it there. And I'll give you a really simple example of, you know, how Zoom's pivoting to be an AI first company. We've all done meetings, we've all taken notes, written that follow-up email, sending the next steps. Something as simple as automating that and doing that through AI, smart intelligence of the recording and sending that out. That would take, you know, 10 people have 10 meetings in your company a day. They spend 10 to 15 minutes doing that at the end of every session. Having that just done for you, okay, fantastic. That's 15 minutes, half an hour freed up to those individuals' times back into their day to focus on something else. That's a really simple, basic example. I appreciate that, but you get the point, right? It's how can you tell that story to your customer so they can go, okay, yeah, I relate to that. There's value. Let's talk.
No, I think that's a very fair point. I very much agree with you. I think our customers, they're emotional about their pets. They wouldn't care if we advertise, oh, claims processed by AI. For them, it's more important. Claims processed money back in 15 minutes. That's like a bigger sell for them than just saying that we are doing it with AI. That doesn't mean anything for them more specifically. It's the value that it brings.
Yeah, I agree with that. And do you guys, I mean, do you believe some of these timelines we hear for, you know, for AI? You know, I heard a lot of people this week saying, and already, I mean, we've seen AI take great big strides. Does it concern you? Does it worry you? Do you feel like, crap, you know, these tools could get very good and I could get behind the curve on them and they could disrupt my business? Or do you just see the opportunities with these tools? Max or Hedda, whoever wants to have a go at that.
I only see, for us right now, it's more opportunities. I think we're still at the phase where it's more a lot of opportunities popping up, and then I think we're gonna have to wait and see a bit who's doing it best, what companies will survive, how will it develop. But I think pet insurance per se is such a mix of different, so I think it's not going to be replaced by AI per se, but it's going to make the process easier for customers, our work easier. So I think see more opportunities right now for us.
I fully agree with that. I see also most opportunities, and it's the first time in basically ages that I've been thankful for kind of like not being a software company, right? Because I think ultimately the cost of developing software will decrease significantly. I think if you're a company like Zoom, you profit immensely from network effects. So I think that's also a different story there. And but I think if you're kind of like now launching a SaaS business and kind of like doing the next CRM for a specific use case, I think it's become a lot more uncertain that kind of like the modes that have been true for SaaS business in the past, or kind of like this payoff, this investment hypotheses around SaaS business will be maintainable in the very long run. And so I think it's a very interesting phase that we're in. I think the opportunities definitely outweigh the risks. And so I'm quite excited that we have kind of like for the first time in the past, let's say, 20 years, again, like a mobile moment where I think the world is very quickly changing. And I think none of us can really see where it's headed exactly, but all of us realize that it's changing quite quickly, and that's super exciting.
I completely agree. I think it's human nature, isn't it? When change comes along fast, you probably lean more towards focusing on the potential negatives of a scenario rather than focusing on the the positive outcomes. So there is that side. I think from a business leaders level, I think being able to give your staff the confidence that actually these are the positives that we see through investing in AI and making sure that they're comfortable, that they're not, everybody's going to be worried about losing their jobs to AI. Well, actually, no, we're going to take away probably what you don't like about your job, the mundane part, and make sure you're focusing on the really high value part of your role. And maybe that just gets lost a little bit. But I think, everybody's got a responsibility to try and steer people towards the positives of what this can bring and the opportunities rather than the negatives.
Yeah, I think like communicating basically exactly what you just said, Andy, is super, super difficult, right? Like ultimately getting people excited for this, kind of like motivating them for change and explaining, hey, don't worry, we will have enough work.
Yeah.
Just the work will change. That can be scary, right? Like that's a lot of change. That's hard. And so communicating that is a huge challenge.
Yeah, I agree. I think no one likes the big admin part, so I think everyone would be happy to get rid of it. But I think it's often it's communicated that are going to cut the workforce by this percentage, and I think that can scare people. I think it's just shift what you're going to focus on.
Yeah, someone reminded us, someone on a panel yesterday reminded us that it used to be someone's job to make photocopies of meeting notes before a meeting, and that wasn't a fun job. And technology is progressively taking away crap jobs or replacing crap jobs, which is a good thing, I guess. I think we could probably keep chatting about AI, but I do want to give some time as well to the Q&A questions. So let me have a look here. Question from John here. He said, what are some of the pain points that customers report having when they're using your platforms, using your apps? And yeah, how do you, if you have any, if you can share, if you feel comfortable sharing about these pain points, and how do you help improve these pain points or eradicate them?
I mean, I can start. I think like for us, all of those the true pain points are really painful. And I think the true pain points are ultimately around expectation management, right? Like customers expect something different from us than what we are able to deliver or what we are delivering, right? And so kind of like reflecting on that and understanding where these disconnects are coming from is super, super insightful. And so, for example, one of the big complaint that we are getting is around delivery times of cars. And so we promise an exact date, and we even then like two days before the delivery, we promise a 4-hour window in which the delivery happens. I don't know, like I know very few people who complain when kind of like their Amazon package arrives 1 day late, right? Like you have built up this tolerance, you have kind of like this expectation management around like, okay, this is a best estimate, but like if it arrives 1 day late, I might complain, but like most of the time I don't really care. And so for us, like we are establishing this new pattern, we are establishing this new kind of like go-to-market motion, this new way of accessing mobility. And so for us, consumers are very rightfully expecting, because we communicated that they get the car in that time frame. And for us, managing expectations around that delivery date, making sure that the customer is available during that time, because they need to kind of like take the key and kind of like sign a quick thing. But at the same time that, oh yeah, this is uncertain, this might change, like you're trying to move 2 tons of steel through basically like maybe 1 or 2 countries, that also kind of like introduces some uncertainty, is, for example, something where we are struggling with, and something that causes quite a bit of dissatisfaction, where there is kind of like no one simple answer on how to solve it.
It's funny actually when you mentioned the delivery. Some delivery companies just send you an email, an update for every point of the journey. It's gone to dispatch, it's gone to the delivery. It feels unnecessary, some of these emails that you get. You just need to know when it's coming to your house. But yeah, I imagine some people putting a time range, I think, sounds sensible. That will keep people from complaining, I reckon. Heather, what about you? Any pain points with your app?
Yeah, I think 2 comes to mind, and I think a bit similar to what Max talked about. Our similar is maybe, when is my money coming back? That is the claims cost, the claims payment that we already discussed, which is always, some, if they pass the AI, will go super quick. If it needs a bit more manual work, it can take longer. People have in certain market paid upfront, and then it can be quite a lot of money. So that's always super important to be able to communicate and make sure it's fast. But that is a pain point. That is why we're working with AI to really automate as much as possible and making it super fast. I think sorry, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, I was just thinking because, both your companies depend on like good reviews online, and you have good reviews. Can you be proactive about getting those good reviews? Are there things you can do to ensure that the reviews are as good as possible?
I mean, of course, you can make sure that you have a good flow of CRM when and how you send out those kind of reviews. That is super important and super key. That's part of your CRM flow.
Cool. Yeah.
It's always easy to talk about the negative experience, but kind of like nudging people to also talk about the positive experience is a lot harder. So kind of like nudging that and integrating it into your regular flows is, I think, the key.
Yeah. Our second kind of challenge for us, I think, we've been expanding quickly. I think the balance of being a startup that wants to grow quickly is just kind of, what parts do you do perfect and what parts do you maybe spend a little bit less time on and get done. So for example, we have our app. We've done a lot of translations for different languages, but the consumers, they love their pets. They're very quick to point out, oh, this translation or this question here, they're getting a lot of input. They're having feedback on the app, this button here, or could maybe be here. But I think for us, we always need to balance that with, is it one person that didn't understand it? Was it one person who complained? Versus like running fast and tackling bigger market versus making everything 100% picture perfect versus being a little bit more 80-20. And I think it's super important to be mindful of what part you can be a bit 80-20 on and what parts you need to be very good at and very thorough. So for example, everything involved regulations, there you can't be 80-20. But if it's a little translation in one article, maybe you don't need to be 100-0. I think that's always a balance that we are facing.
I remember.
Especially have very passionate customers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I remember Max, you telling me last year that you got some very honest feedback from your mom who used your service, and you were appreciative of that, even though it was negative feedback.
Yeah, she wrote a 3-star review. Everything is great, but I don't know which car I'm getting next. And I was like, yeah, like you could have called me. No, but it's also a fun pain point, right? Like people are absolutely happy with the service, but there is some uncertainty around kind of like, when will which car be available for me as a follow-up? And so my mother had like a good experience so far, like didn't experience any problems. She got a review reminder for us. And for her at that moment, top of mind was, what's going to be my follow-up car? Like, which car am I going to drive next? Will I be able to keep the Fiat 500e that I've really, really enjoyed driving? And so, like, for her, it was absolutely crucial that she solves this problem, and she wasn't able to see on the website, like, there was currently no Fiat 500 Electro available. Like, will she be able to get one again? Like, it's only in 4 months, but it's upcoming. And so she wrote that in the review, and I thought that was quite honest. And like, also something that we already knew beforehand and that we are continuously addressing, but one area that we are investing in, because I think that kind of like ability to plan, that kind of like giving customer certainty is like a huge point. And then also like just listening honestly, like, I mean, we know that we aren't perfect, and we know that there are areas that we need to improve, and there are areas that we have prioritized to improve in. And so I think like just listening to the feedback honestly is very important.
Thank you, Max. It's nice your mom, is interested in what you do, and my mom thinks I work for Spotify. It sounds a bit like Sifted. So I see I'm looking at the clock here, 14 minutes left. I still have like pages of questions, but I'm gonna prioritize a few now, and I'm gonna try and answer a few more from this box. So we have one here from Visela. What challenges have you experienced with functions becoming siloed as the company grows? I think, Hedy, you said you're still quite small as a team, but have you come across any?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're 60 people, and it's been a strategy to be pretty small in the team, but I think we're across 3 different cities, or 3 different countries, even more cities, which means that I think that's really the balance of working hybrid. And I think for us, the key thing to not be too siloed is to try to meet and have kind of mixing up the office with people from tech can meet customer success or claims or marketing, and then over lunch or in the office you chat and come to kind of realization about different things. When you can't do that, when you have different offices and you can't maybe travel every week, trying to set up common meetings where you actually sync a lot between different teams and try to work cross-functionally. So I think that's always been key and worked very well for us, but I guess it's harder and harder the bigger you become with the number of employees.
Yeah, maybe just to jump off the back of that as well. So, I mean, a lot of what Head has just said there can definitely relate to. It's just around the alignment and the alignment of goals specifically, because when you're small enough and you're all in the same office, you're running lean, you're wearing different hats, you kind of know what everybody's objectives are, and even if you don't directly, you probably overhear it in that close environment. As you scale and departments take on their own function, their own purpose, their goals go further away from where your department's goals are. And if you're not sharing that and you're not telling each other what you're working on, how you can be collaborative, and it will happen organically, right? As you grow and you scale, naturally you may not have those direct conversations. So I would say to try and keep that in your fabric at all times is that constant communication and collaboration around your goals and making sure you're aligned as best as possible. We went from 4 people in an office to nearly 1,000 in the region, and there's definitely been some pains around cross-functional silos as we've learned. But I think the main thing is just bringing together everybody in that collaborative environment as often as you can with purpose.
Thank you, Andy. Max, I'm going to ask you a different question. Well, actually, I mean, you had a big announcement this week, so I should definitely ask you about that. But first, I just saw a question pop into the chat, which is interesting. What have you learned from failed scale-ups around you? Have you taken away any learnings from similar kinds of companies that have, had some pitfalls? Yeah, how's that informed what you do at your company?
So I think like one way to phrase it is like we made our own mistakes. So I think like we definitely looked around us and kind of like identified a couple of patterns that we didn't want to do. So like, for example, one thing that is incredibly important to us is kind of like, how do our unit economics look like, and how can we make money, and how does this kind of like not work in some kind of like fantastical scenario, but how does that really work tangibly on scale soon. And so I think focusing on unit economics, first principles, and kind of like understanding kind of like what needs to change, understanding which scale you need to get to, it's just something that I can really, really recommend. And I think that's probably one thing where we never bought into the kind of like growth at all costs view set, but we also made a ton of kind of like mistakes that I think were also quite specific to us. So like in our peer group, or like also in other like larger scale ups, like the timing at which they, for example, expanded geographically was significantly later, right? And so we expanded to the US quite early in our journey, and kind of like weren't sufficiently capitalized to kind of like to grow as quickly in the US as we wanted to, where we underestimated the volatility of the market. And with that volatility, could not invest as much as we wanted to, where we thought that 2021 would go on forever and there would be quite a bit of capital lying left and right on the road. It would be really, really easy to raise, but it ultimately didn't end up being that way. And so I think like there are both like failures, so to say, like new errors that we made, but also I think like a couple of takeaways where we approach things quite differently since the beginning.
And of course, you secured that huge financing commitment this week, which I mentioned at the beginning of the session. Does this mean the US could be back on the cards for you, because you now have access to up to $1 billion, I read?
Yeah, so I think like this is great news because it allows us to scale, it allows us to buy a lot more cars. So like just to be clear, like that huge financing facility that Diana talked about is a debt facility. So it's purpose oriented to ultimately increase our fleet, to fund the fleet growth. It's extremely sizable, it's quite scalable, it's fairly cheap and efficient, significantly cheaper and efficient than what we had before. So I think on all level, great news for us, and also moving us significantly to profitability. So that allows further growth. For now, we will focus on Germany, but I think that also allows further growth in other geographies.
And the very last question, Max, because I just have it here on my notes, and then I'll go to Hedda and Andy. But big election coming up in Germany. You know, how are you feeling about it? Is there a sense it's going to be pivotal for businesses this year?
I think ultimately what I'm mainly looking for from politicians from a business perspective is clarity. So I kind of like want to know what the environment is going to look like for the next 3 to 5 years and then plan accordingly. I think one thing that has been really, really bothersome is ultimately the volatility that we've seen around policies and around the route. I think like on a personal level, I have much more mixed feelings, but I think from a professional level, my main ask to politicians is kind of like give people clarity and enable them to plan for the medium to long term. Otherwise, it will be very, very hard for companies, and specifically young startups, if they not only need to worry about product market fit, fundraising, and so on, but also need to worry about the environment and the rule set that's ever changing.
Thank you, Max. Hedda, nearing the end here, but I'm curious, and also I see a question in the box about, you know, further expansion that you might have in mind. It is quite a competitive market you're in. There are different companies doing this around Europe, and as Kevin says in the Q&A box, you know, there are mature markets, UK, for example, a lot of different players. So is expansion in mind for you guys? And, you know, how do you see the future generally? Because we mentioned that, you know, some of this explosion in pet ownership might flatten off a little bit, and there's other potential headwinds like return to the office mandates, which might make it, you know, tricky for people to have pets if they have to go back to the office for 5 days a week.
Yeah, no, I think there's two types of markets. I think there are the more mature markets like Sweden, UK, where a lot of people have pet insurance. I think the benefits, and then it's, Germany, France, almost the rest of Europe is a lot more kind of white space where people are thinking about maybe getting pet insurance. And there are some pros and cons of both markets. I think we've been lucky that now we've cracked how to work with both of the different markets, and they have different benefits. I think the markets are growing quicker in, Germany, France, and so forth. But there you also have to educate the customer. What is this? Why is it needed? In UK and Sweden, it's a well-known product. And if your reviews, your product, your terms, your pricing is better than everyone else, it's not hard to grow a lot because the market is already there. And if you're better than competition, they're going to choose you. Whereas the other one, you have to more create the market. So I think the market is good in two different ways. And we've been lucky enough to crack both of them, which is exciting. I think for us right now, we quite recently launched France. So we're still focused on kind of penetrating the markets there more. And we are in 3 big markets. So right now we don't have a new country planned, but let's see. I think I like country expansion, and as long as we can do it very efficiently with the small and lean team, for us it's pretty easy. Apart from that initial lot of admin work that you have to do for every new European market, which I would love to have something a little bit more smooth in the future. But right now it's a lot of paperwork.
Well, there's some ideas around the EU 28 regime, to smoothen out or to standardize some of these rules for companies. Let's see if that happens in Brussels. Do you need to raise any more money? You raised a Series B in 2023. Do you need to raise a Series C, or you have enough money?
So I think it depends how fast and if and when we want to launch more countries. If we want to stay in the markets that we're at, we also focus a lot on unit economics, and we have a lean team. So for us, we can just decide now we're profitable and just adapt the growth a little bit, and then we are profitable. But for us, it's just a decision. How fast do we want to run? There's always a little bit of an upfront investment to launch a new market. So that's just a strategic decision for us. We could be profitable now if we wanted to, which was a great benefit when we raised the latest round. I think that's something investors look for, that even more now. So I think that's just a strategic question. If you want to go profitability now, or just grab a bit bigger market share and bigger scale before we do it.
Very good. Thank you, Hedda. And I want to turn the mic to Andy now in the time that's remaining. We talked a bit about, of course, the tools that are going to be important for startups as they grow. And you have a good sense of the markets. You're out there. You're listening to what companies need. What is going to be critical for companies' growth, do you think, this year and future years?
Good question. How long have we got? 1 minute. Again, I'll strip it back to what I say. Like, if you can find tools that are out there that are going to make your employees more efficient and productive, and can somehow weave into your offering, which delivers more value to your customers, and they're going to be worth their weight in gold. I think that, again, going back to it, a lot of tech companies have got those AI brands on their logos now, so you're going to have a lot of choice. The other thing that we're seeing, which again is probably just to touch on really quickly, is more of a shift towards a consolidation of applications rather than growing your tech stack even further. And businesses have diversified their offering exponentially. So you're probably working with 3, 4, 5 core vendors that can do the job of 20 applications that you have within your tech stack right now. So I think actually probably what you'll see is companies looking to consolidate on a smaller number of core applications rather than going to market and finding a load of new things. It's just going to take some time to figure out which ones those are. Not quick enough.
Thank you, Andy. So hopefully that was useful for the audience. Now I certainly heard some nuggets throughout that surely will be useful for companies that are listening in and they want to tap into more growth this year. The good news is that we're going to keep doing the leaderboards. So if there's anyone on the call that thinks, it's a crime that their company wasn't on there, they should apply or get in touch with us and we can help you point you to how to apply. We're going to keep doing that. And thanks for joining us. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Hedda, Max, Andy for your time and your insights. As I mentioned, the leaderboards, I also have to make that little plug again. We have data on these companies, data that they agreed to share with us. Of course. And if that's interesting for anyone out there, we can hook you up with that. Yeah, sorry to one person whose question we didn't answer in the Q&A box, but thanks everyone else for contributing, and we'll see you again soon.